Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stu again. The California High-Speed Rail Authority recently approved its final 2026 business plan. The project's outlook is currently grim, so we're going to talk about that and some options of where it might go from this point. The problem that the business plan indirectly expresses is that the California High-Speed Rail Authority no longer has adequate funding to build its 171-mile initial operating segment. This conclusion is also supported by the State Legislative Analyst's Office and the California High-Speed Rail Office of the Inspector General. Though the project recently received an additional $15 billion over 15 years from California's Cap and Invest carbon tax, it needs nearly all of that money in the next 5 years in order to complete the IOS in a timely manner. Costs to finance those funds would absorb the difference between current total funding and total estimated cost. This is true even for a truncated 162-mile budget version with a permanent Merced station 3 miles southeast from its downtown and a temporary Bakersfield station near 7th Standard Road 6 miles to the northwest of its downtown. The original 171-mile downtown Merced to downtown Bakersfield proposal for the IOS is currently estimated to be $8.3 billion underfunded. At the moment, this is the version that the authority is legally required to build. That may change though. So the question for this video is, if they can't build the intended initial operating segment with current funding, what can they build? With how much more money, and where would that money come from? In April, I made a video called Dig the Damn Tunnels, which was in response to a blog post by Rick Harnish of the High Speed Rail Alliance, suggesting that California should dig its significant and expensive tunneled sections as a form of commitment to the project. I analyzed how much that would cost, presented Rick with 3 options, and challenged him to choose one. Well, Rick responded to me in email, but he went rogue by coming up with a 4th solution. I got Rick rogued. Rick's solution is to take the money out of California's road budget. California takes a lot of tax money in from a lot of sources to pay for transportation, but only a portion directly goes to roads. Most of that is in the state's road maintenance and rehab account and the state highway account. The rehab account sends about $3 billion a year to cities and counties to maintain roads, and about $1.5 billion a year to build new ones. The state highway account applies to the state's highway and interstate highway systems. That allocates $7.5 billion a year for maintenance and $4 billion a year for new construction. The catch here is that $4.5 billion of that money is federal matching funds that can't apply to California High-Speed Rail and that the state doesn't want to lose, so those funds and funds to get those matches are out. That leaves about $3.5 billion on the maintenance side that might get moved around. Before digging too deeply into maintenance budgets, it should be mentioned that 58% of California's roads are in poor or mediocre condition, not exactly ready to absorb a few years of deferred maintenance. At the same time, the Reason Foundation found that California spends 3 times as much per mile as Texas on highways, so maybe Caltrans could stand to take a haircut and figure out how to spend more efficiently. Let's assume for a moment that half of the rehab account's outlay budget and half of the highway account's non-federal state operations budget are up for grabs. That's about $2.5 billion a year. Currently, California High-Speed Rail has funding of $20.5 billion, with $16.8 billion of that spent. In addition, $1 billion is expected to come in each of the next 20 years, for total available funding of $39.3 billion, including some anticipated future expenses. Spending $3.5 billion a year to advance the project could have the IOS between Merced and Bakersfield operating around 2034 as planned, and have all the tunnels bored for the planned, mostly single-tracked interim Phase 1 plan like Rick wanted. At that rate, San Francisco could be reached with interim service by 2041, Palmdale by 2048, Los Angeles by 2051, and Anaheim by 2053. That's for the interim Phase 1, which would take 4 hours between LA and San Francisco. The full build-out 2-hour 40-minute version would take another 15 years at that rate. So Rick, you might have something there if it's politically possible, but it comes up a little short in terms of expediency. We'd like it done in our lifetime, so we might need yet another funding source. Another idea is a Change.org petition that I put together with conservative commentator Mark Joffe and Dreamstar CEO Joshua Dominic. Check it out. Sign the petition if you like this idea. We want to send the issue back to the people, get a referendum on the ballot to confirm support, reform some of the authorities' approaches, and float a bond large enough to get trains running between Bakersfield and San Francisco so people can see how an operating segment connected to the coast affects their way of life. Then if the state wants to continue, it can figure out how to fund the rest. This is similar to an approach I floated a few years ago in my video, What Went Wrong with California High-Speed Rail? Authority estimates have this costing about $25 billion more than they currently have available. That could be operating by 2038 and would leave about $100 billion to go on the full Phase 1 build-out, but it could also attract more private investment. Let me know what you think about that in the comments, and go sign the petition if you think it's a good idea. Combine something like this with Rick's idea and the private funding that would show up as a result, and you move the timeline forward by 8 or 10 years. This makes it clear that the project needs an enormous cash injection, and soon, to get it operating in a timely manner. While we're on funding, the federal government is the most obvious place to look for these levels of investment. Plain and simple, California needs almost $90 billion just to get an interim Phase 1 solution going. $90 billion is 1.2% of this year's federal budget and 10% of the defense budget. The problem is that those levels of federal spending for this purpose likely aren't happening without strong control of the presidency and both houses of Congress by Democrats. Demographically, Democrats are going to have a real challenge pulling that off in the 2030s because the country is migrating from blue states to red ones. 2028 may be the last chance for a while, and then things may swing back around in the 2040s. The country also has a ton of debt that will make deficit spending that much more difficult each year into the foreseeable future. There is plenty of room to shift priorities, but overall huge amounts of federal high-speed rail funding don't have an easy path in the midterm. So let's talk about some options that exist with the funds currently available. The most immediate off-ramp is the completion of the first 119 miles connected to BNSF right-of-way on both ends. On the Stu Crew Discord server, invite in the description, we call this Ben Rail. Ben Rail is named for Ben from the Empire State Passengers Association. Go check out their Facebook page. Ben just loves the idea of Frankenstein dual-mode high-speed rail. This particular version of Ben Rail is based around a hypothetical two-headed Amtrak Aero train set that the Stu Crew invented. This would be able to utilize BNSF right-of-way as Amtrak Gold Runner does now between Bakersfield, Sacramento, and Oakland. In the midst of that route would be 119 miles of electrified high-speed track certified for 220-mile-per-hour operation. The Siemens Venture carriages on these Aero sets are rated for 230 kilometers per hour, that's 143 miles per hour, and a locomotive on either end could push an 8 to 10 car set to that speed no problem. Gold Runner currently takes an hour and 55 minutes between Bakersfield and Fresno. I have Ben Rail making the same trip in an hour and 15 minutes. Trips further north from Bakersfield would be 45 minutes faster overall than current Gold Runner. That would be accomplished with between $22 and $24 billion that should be available in time for it to be spent. Trains like this, based on existing technology, could also be running as soon as 2029. Up next is an initial operating segment truncated down from 171 miles to 130. This would originate at 7th Standard Road outside of Bakersfield in the south and end at the new Madera station in the north. Their California high-speed rail could connect with Amtrak Gold Runner for trips further to the north. Madera is part of the first 119 miles and some work is already done there. Madera is also the most northern station before California high-speed rail's planned turn to the west toward Gilroy and San Francisco. This option would leave Merced off the IOS completely and its works would be completed at a later date. This could be accomplished for a total expenditure of between $32 and $42 billion. Why the disparity? SB 198 is a law from 2022 that defines the IOS as double-tracked from downtown Merced to Bakersfield. The authority currently favors a mostly single-tracked alternative that is less expensive, but SB 198 needs to be changed, overturned, or invalidated first. Since opening is being held up by train set procurement at this point as much as anything else, it's unlikely this option could be open for service before 2033. Because this option would be $3.4 billion cheaper than the 162-mile option, it is far more likely to happen when considering the expense necessary for delivering 20 years worth of cap and invest money in the next few years. Without additional funding, I think this option is presently the most likely to happen, opening sometime between 2034 and 2040. A third truly nuclear option would be to cancel the Overhead Contact Systems contract for the first 119 miles, and then run 125 mile per hour capable diesel-electric trains. These are already in service in California but top out at 90 miles per hour on freight tracks. This 125 mile per hour option would only be about 10 minutes slower than BenRail between Bakersfield and Madera, but it would also only be $500 million cheaper, and there is enough funding for a BenRail option. Simply stopping construction is not an intelligent option. A lot of infrastructure has been completed. The cost to complete is less than the cost to tear it down. At a minimum, the first 119 miles should be completed without the electric infrastructure, and it should be tied into BNSF tracks at Shafter and Madera as a high-speed bypass. Like BenRail, this is something that can be operating in the next few years. Lastly, though it's a bit of a long shot, the legislature could give California high-speed rail everything it wants this year, and the authority could scrape together a couple $2 billion of private investment support to get the 162-mile version of the IOS done. Otherwise, according to CEO Ian Chaudhry, costs could rise 7 to 9% every year. Those things don't happen. Even if a 162-mile IOS comes to pass, the funding will be exhausted, and who knows what happens next. A San Joaquin Valley-only high-speed train is one of the worst possible outcomes for the project. So should California cut bait and run or increase funding to get more done? Do you support any of the options presented in this video, or do you have an idea of your own? Let me know in the comments. Hey, plenty more videos to come. Up next is Stu's News on the 3rd. There are a plethora of ways to support the channel.
What is a plethora?
Check those out in the description or click that super thanks button. Also check out that change.org petition and sign it. Here's a big thanks to the Stu Crew Discord server. If you'd like to join our motley crew, check out the invite in the description. And of course, I can't forget my conspicuous supporters on Patreon. Their support makes content like this possible. They know who they are, and now everybody else does too. You too can add your name to this list on my Patreon page. Even if high-speed rail in the US is going through a rough patch, there's still plenty to talk about. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big, beautiful freeway.